Every generation thinks it's unique. Every single one. But if you're paying attention right now, you can see something deeper happening. Not just trends, not just politics, not just cultural shifts, but a complete inversion of reality itself. What used to be considered common sense is now mocked. What used to be respected is torn down. What used to be obviously destructive is now celebrated. And I don't know about you, but it feels like the ground underneath our feet is being flipped upside down. It's how our systems are structured, man. The institutions that were supposed to build us up are hollowing us out. The food that we're told is healthy makes us sick. And the medicines that are supposed to heal us don't. In fact, a lot of the times they do the exact opposite, and they even trap us. The relationships that we're told that are meant to be fulfilling leave us empty. And the education that's supposed to expand our minds narrows our thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't an accident. This is the world we've inherited. A world that's been engineered in many ways to keep us dependent and compliant and disoriented. And what I want to do right now is walk you through it step by step, not to complain or lament or play the victim, but to show you that that pattern is real. And more importantly, to show you how to break out of it. So let's start with the most basic need: food. Our food system is completely inverted. You don't have to look far and wide to see how bizarre it is that a box of neon-colored cereal can end up on the government's healthy list, while whole foods like grass-fed beef or eggs or raw milk from a farm are demonized. That's not nutrition. That's profit-driven science. We live in a nation where alcohol is legal and raw milk is illegal. Make that make sense. But yeah, when that broken food system leaves people sick, where do they turn? Well, the medical industry, of course. And here's the very important part, one of the greatest takeaways that you need to know here in this video is modern medicine didn't just evolve naturally. It was deliberately shaped by people with money and power. Remember this name, look it up, John D. Rockefeller, being one of the most influential. So Rockefeller's creation of the General Education Board in 1902 and his funding of medical schools through the Flexner Report in 1910. Look that up. Flexner Report, Flexner. What that did was it reshaped medicine into a standardized pharmaceutical-driven industry. What that means is natural medicine, holistic healing, and herbal traditions, things human beings had used for centuries and relied upon, that were tested and approved, were painted as quackery and systemically erased. And you might be asking, well, why? Because you can't patent a plant. But you know what you can do? You can patent a pill made from petroleum derivatives. You can do that. That's what they did. That's what he did. And by 1921, Rockefeller was funding the Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center, part of a nationwide movement to professionalize medicine, but with strings attached. Schools that wanted his money had to adopt the new model. And that new model is full-time faculty teaching research-based pharmaceutical-driven medicine. That's the origin of the system we live under today. It wasn't just about progress. It was about control. It was about designing a system that made us dependent on treatments rather than empowered through prevention. And you know what they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But yeah, it's still structured that way. Treat the symptom, not the root cause. Keep people coming back. Keep the money flowing. A patient cured is a customer lost. Now, that same thinking shows up in our work culture. There's another guy you might be familiar with, Henry Ford, right? Ford Motor Company. What did he do besides build cars? Well, he created this thing called the 40-hour work week. He popularized it. And it was praised as progressive at the time. But what it really did was create a rhythm where human beings were optimized for industrial productivity. 5 days of labor, 2 days of consumption, work to produce, then spend your earnings to keep the machine running. That rhythm has barely been questioned in 100 years. Barely been questioned. In over 100 years, even though technology could have freed us. The point was never freedom. It was stability for the system. And this broken foundation leads us to another inversion. The way we treat sickness and obesity. Instead of seeing health as the baseline, we've normalized dysfunction. We tell people it's empowering to accept chronic illness instead of fixing it. We market pills and injections as shortcuts instead of, talking about things that are important like, sleep, nutrition, movement, and community, right? Obesity is not a moral failing, but it is a healthcare crisis. And the problem is not shaming individuals. The problem is that an entire system profits from keeping people stuck in cycles of poor health. The more dependent you are, the more valuable you are to these industries that are selling these treatments, these subscriptions, these products that keep you just functional enough, just functional enough to keep paying and needing their products. We shouldn't be celebrating sickness as normal. We should be asking why a society with such a vast amount of knowledge and technology seems to be getting sicker and sicker and more anxious and more fragile by the year. Let's move to another cornerstone, relationships. We live in a culture that glorifies short-term hookups over long-term commitments, celebrates divorce parties instead of building resilient families, and then also pushes the idea that being perpetually single or endlessly trading partners is somehow empowering. What? Make that make sense. At the same time, we've created a legal system where in divorce, fathers are routinely reduced to part-time parents or visitors. Children grow up without strong father figures because of this. And the data is crystal clear. Fatherlessness is linked to high crime and drug use and high rates of depression and anxiety and all sorts of ills that we're seeing in society. A society that sidelines fathers sidelines its own future. And yet the narrative we're fed is that this is just how things are. It's just how they are, What are you going to do? Just that, that broken families are normal, that it's fine to raise kids without balance. The reality is that it isn't fine. Children pay the price. Boys grow up without guidance, and girls grow up without protection. And cycles of dysfunction just repeat over and over and over and over. Now let's dive into division. Because if you want to further weaken a society, you don't have to invade it. Not a single shot needs to be fired. You just have to divide it by, race against race, religion against religion, left against right, male against female. None of this is speculation. This is exactly what the former KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov warned about back in, I believe, 1984 in an interview with G. Edward Griffin over 41 years ago. And at that point, he said that their goals were overfulfilled. So imagine how fulfilled they are now. But yeah, anyways, so he explained that the real weapon of the Soviet system wasn't espionage. He mentioned that only 15% of their resources went into James Bond style spy work, right? The romantic stuff that we see in movies. That was only 15%. The other 85% went into ideological subversion, which is a slow process of changing how a nation perceives reality itself. And so he broke it into 4 stages. And those 4 stages are demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. And the first one, demoralization, this takes 15 to 20 years, long enough to raise an entire generation. And what you do is you pump an ideology, the ideology of the enemy, into the soft heads of American students in the schools and the media and the culture, until these young people lose their roots and lose their confidence in their ability to tell truth from lies. And once the demoralization process is complete, even when they're confronted with true facts, true information, they cannot process them. They can't process them at all. They're too far gone. And then the second stage, destabilization, that takes 2 to 5 years, where the economy, foreign relations, and defense are undermined. You create crises and weaken trust in institutions. Then there's crisis, which is a tipping point. It's often manufactured, and that causes chaos and fear. And then finally, the last stage is normalization. So that's when the new order is imposed. And so in the interview, Bezmenov pointed out out in cynicism of the term, he pointed out the cynicism of it. After the Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia in 1978, Bezmenov, or was it Brezhnev? That was his name. He said the situation in brother Czechoslovakia is normalized. He used the term normalized, which is it's a cynical expression. But does that sound familiar? I mean, look around. Do you think it's a coincidence that every debate in our society is weaponized into division? That people that were raised in the last 20 to 30 years often struggle to process basic truths? That we can't agree on the most fundamental realities of life? Division weakens us. Unity strengthens us. And when we're divided, we are easy to control. And then there's materialism. We've been sold the idea that happiness lives in the next purchase, right? The next car, the next house, the next phone upgrade. We are surrounded with more abundance than any generation before us. And yet, depression, anxiety, and loneliness are epidemic. Why? Again, why? Well, because possessions can't replace purpose. Consumerism feeds the machine, but it starves the soul at the same time. And if you've ever chased a purchase only to feel the emptiness return days later, you know exactly what I mean. You can buy a Porsche 911, a brand new Porsche 911. After 2 weeks, that's the new baseline. You're used to it, and then it's Just whatever, you know? The novelty wears off quick. But yeah, I digress. So this brings us to education, the system designed to shape how we think. Not how to think, but, you know, what to think. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, John D. Rockefeller and the General Education Board in 1902 pushed for standardization, not to create independent thinkers, but to mold obedient workers. He said, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. He was quoted saying that. So schools became standardized, uniform, and rigid. You got bells, schedules, rows of desks, all designed less like spaces of, learning and more like training grounds for compliance. If you look at a classroom, you can tell that creativity wasn't the priority. And questioning authority wasn't the priority either. The top priority was teaching obedience, repetition, and conformity. The exact traits needed for the industrial workforce in the 20th century. And when those students graduated, they stepped right into the system that mirrored what they had already been trained for, the 40-hour work week. Which, like I stated, Henry Ford had popularized in 1926. And it was praised as humane compared to the brutal factory hours before it. But yeah, once again, let's think about the structure. 5 days of labor, 2 days to rest and consume. Once again, like I told you, it was not designed to maximize your freedom. It was designed to maximize your productivity for the system, for the machine, to grease that cog. It created a rhythm. Spend your youth in school, where you're conditioned to follow bells and schedules, then transition seamlessly into a job where the same rhythm continues. Your labor fuels industry. Then your weekend fuels consumerism. And that cycle repeats over and over and over and over until you're dead. And that is what obedience looks like on a societal scale. The system doesn't need you to be free. It needs you to be predictable. And now you can't talk about how, inverted our world has become without talking about the cultural reset that has been happening for decades. And this is where Yuri Bezmenov's warning hits very hard. I would say where it hits the hardest. He explained that once the demoralization process is complete, exposure to truth doesn't matter anymore. You can drown people in facts, show them evidence, even take them to see the reality with their own two eyes, and they still won't believe it. Not until the consequences hit them directly, often painfully. That's the danger we're in now. Because when people have been trained to see lies as truth and truth as lies, they'll defend their own chains. It's Stockholm Syndrome. They'll mock anyone who questions the narrative. And they will cling to the illusions, even if their lives get worse. And then Bezmenov also warned that the very people who push for the radical change, the professors, the activists, the so-called useful idiots, are often the first to be discarded once power consolidates. Because once their role in destabilization is complete, they're no longer useful. And history shows this pattern over and over. The revolution eats its own. And here's the sober truth. America is not immune. Western civilization is not immune. If we think we're too exceptional to fall into the same traps that destroyed other civilizations, we're kidding ourselves. Division, demoralization, destabilization, these are the warning signs of decline. So where does this leave us? If everything is inverted, if the systems are designed to weaken us, What do we do? What do we do? I mean, the first step, of course, is awareness. You can't fix what you won't face or what you don't know. Ignorance is not bliss in this particular situation, my friend. Once you see the inversion, you can start rejecting it. You don't have to eat what makes you sick. You don't have to accept relationships that hollow you out. You don't have to follow an education system that stifles your creativity. The second step is building alternatives. Real food, real communities, real families, real education outside the system. Real health that focuses on prevention, not just treatment. And here's where I have to be personal. Not unlike Bezmenov, who could defect and leave, I can't. My son is here, and no matter what happens, I'm not leaving him. If I had the ability, I would leave the West entirely and move to a country where traditional values were still foundational, where families were supported instead of torn apart, and where the courts weren't weaponized against fathers. But I stayed because my role is here with him. And maybe, that's the lesson too. Even if you can't escape the system, you can build a better one inside your own walls. You can make your own family strong. You can make your health strong, your community strong. Those are things that no court and no corporation and no institution can take from you unless you hand them over. So don't. And the third step is unity. Stop letting every difference become a wedge. Stop letting narratives turn neighbor against neighbor. If we can rebuild unity at the local family and community level, then no amount of top-down division can hold. The world is upside down, yes. But that doesn't mean you have to be. The world is upside down, but that doesn't mean you have to be. You can reclaim your health. You can reclaim your relationships. You can reclaim your thinking. The systems around you may be engineered for compliance, but you don't have to comply. Newsflash. You can choose awareness over ignorance, and you can choose unity over division, strength over weakness. Because when enough of us do that, the inversion collapses and reality reasserts itself.